The gratitude of a savior is a cage. Commander Evan Royce stood on the bridge of the UNS Justiciar, the silence a held breath. Before them, Iris 4 hung like a sapphire, marbled with cream, a world barely old enough to have a name. It was a cradle for 74,000 souls, the first great leap of the Aurora Initiative. A solar flare, a once-in-a-millennium event, had nearly scoured it clean 3 weeks ago. The Kythe had saved them. Their gilded biosilk vessels had appeared from the void, deploying vast gossamer energy shields at the last possible moment. Now the bill had come. Royce watched the alien emissary on his main screen, a creature of elegant height and polished obsidian carapace named Tithe Lord Valerius. The being's voice was like honey and cut glass. It spoke of partnership, of uplift, of a shared future. But the document it transmitted spoke a different language entirely, a lexicon of obligation and indenture. Royce had read it 3 times, and with each pass the steel in his spine grew colder. This was not a request for aid. It was a claim of ownership. He knew then this would end in a public inquiry or a star court. The alternative was a quiet surrender he would not countenance. "Your people call it the gratitude tithe," Royce stated, his voice flat and devoid of warmth. "A perpetual 10% tax on all energy production, resource extraction, and intellectual property. For a service rendered without contract." Valerius made a fluid gesture, a ripple of condescension. "A gift requires no contract, Commander. It requires only thanks. Our accord is the formal expression of that thanks, a small token to honor the life we preserved." The path to servitude is paved with beautiful words. On the colony below, a young girl named Ilara sketched the great golden ships in the sky. She used charcoal on a piece of reclaimed synth paper, her family huddled around a low-power thermal lamp in their prefab home. "They're like angels," she whispered to her father, who managed the atmospheric processors for Sector Gamma. He nodded, his face etched with a relief so profound it looked like pain. "They are sweet, girl. They saved us all." He had no idea the angels were there to put them in chains. Back on the Justiciar tactical officer, Thorne shifted his weight, the heavy fabric of his uniform rustling. "Sir, their fleet positioning is protective. They've established a perimeter around the planet's gravity well. Not hostile, but not friendly either. They are staking a claim," Royce murmured, eyes locked on the Tithe Lord. "They believe we are too weak, too grateful to refuse." He looked at the legal document again, its alien script shimmering with golden filigree. It was an elegant trap designed to be signed in a moment of desperate relief. Humanity had learned long ago that the most dangerous chains were the ones you willingly put on, Magister Royce said, addressing the ship's integrated fleet mind. "Analyze Kythe legal precedent. Find every instance of this. Gratitude tithe. Cross-reference with the doctrine of urgent accord." The cool, synthesized voice of the AI responded instantly from the bridge emitters. "Analysis initiated. Preliminary findings indicate the Kythe have successfully levied this tithe on 17 pre-stellar civilizations. In all cases, the accord was presented within 1 planetary rotation of a salvation event. The legal framework is robust, Commander. It has never been successfully challenged. A debt freely accepted is a debt that can be paid." This was something else. This was a shackle offered as a life raft, because no one had a ship like the Justiciar in their corner. Royce countered, a low fire in his voice. He activated a private channel to Valerius. "Tithe Lord, your offer is noted. It is also refused. We will compensate you for the energy expenditure of your shield deployment with a generous margin for risk and salvage. Send us a ledger of your costs." The Tithe Lord's polished face remained impassive, but a flicker of something ancient and predatory stirred in its multifaceted eyes. "Costs. Commander 1 does not ask a parent for the cost of childbirth. We gave you continued existence. The tithe is the only payment we will accept. It is a matter of principle. It is a matter of principle for us as well, Royce replied. We pay for what we receive. We do not pay for the privilege of being. He cut the channel. The silence that followed was heavier than before. He had just refused a savior. He had just declared a war of ledgers and law. The law is a weapon, and its sharpest edge is clarity. Officer Kenna, the ship's diplomatic liaison, spoke into the quiet. Sir, they're hailing again. It's a formal declaration. They're citing Interstellar Precedent 4.7 Gamma. They've declared Aurora's cradle in legal default of a life debt. Her face was pale. They are claiming the colony and its inhabitants as collateral. On the main screen, the tactical display shifted. The Kythe vessels, once holding a passive perimeter, now moved into a tighter formation. They began emitting a soft, golden energy field, a net that enveloped the planet. It wasn't a weapons-grade shield, but a quarantine field. All traffic to and from the colony was now blocked. They were impounding a world. They believe they have us, Thorn growled, his hand resting on the console that controlled the Justiciar's weapon systems. They think we'll either buckle or fire the first shot and make ourselves the aggressors. They are mistaken. Royce said, his calm a stark contrast to the escalating tension. They want a legal battle. We will give them one. But we will fight it on our terms in our arena. He turned to Magister. Begin a deep dive. I want to know everything about the Keith. Their history, their biology, their economic model. Find the lie at the heart of their law. The game was not about ships, but about statutes. Magister's voice filled the bridge, cool and precise. Commander, the Kythe economic structure is based on what they term benevolence capitalism. They identify nascent civilizations facing existential threats, provide salvation, and then integrate them as client states through the gratitude tithe. Their legal arguments are predicated on the idea that their intervention creates an unpayable debt, which can only be serviced, never cleared. A protection racket with a god complex, Kenna muttered disgust coloring her tone. Worse, Royce corrected. A farmer doesn't ask the cattle for permission before building a fence. He paced the length of the command deck, the polished floor reflecting his stern features. The Kythe saw humanity as livestock to be managed, a resource to be cultivated. They had miscalculated. Humanity had a long and bloody history of breaking its fences. He stopped before the main view screen, looking at the golden cage forming around his people's new home. They've initiated a legal action. That means they are bound by the same system of laws they are attempting to weaponize. They have filed a claim. We are entitled to discovery. Numbers do not lie, and a ledger always tells the truth. Magister, compile a full accounting of the solar flare event, Royce ordered. Every joule of energy it produced. Every particle of radiation. Model the precise output and trajectory. Then model the exact energy cost of the Kith shield deployment. I want to know what they spent down to the last watt. Calculations underway, the AI confirmed. I will require access to the colony's sensor logs and our own long-range telemetry. Granted, Royce said. He then turned to Officer Thorn. I want a full passive scan of their fleet. Every ship, every power signature. I want to know their capabilities, their readiness, their supply levels. No active scans. Be a ghost. Thorn nodded, his fingers already dancing across his console. They won't know we're even looking. This fleet teaches by numbers and remembers by ledgers, never by collars. It was the founding principle of the Explorer Corps, a lesson learned after centuries of contact with empires that ruled by divine right and mystical obligation. Humanity had chosen a different path, the path of the receipt, the path of the balanced book. A vignette from the colony flickered across a secondary screen, a low-bandwidth civilian newsfeed. The rationing had begun. The planetary governor was explaining that the benevolent visitors had instituted a temporary quarantine for mutual safety. The colonists were scared. They had survived the fire of a sun only to be trapped in a gilded cage. Their trust was turning to suspicion. The truth had a way of seeping through even the most pleasant lies. Royce watched the faces of his people, their brows furrowed with worry. His resolve hardened into something adamantine. He was not just fighting for a colony. He was fighting for the principle that no one had the right to own another's future. A civilization that forgets the price of freedom will soon be asked to pay it again. Magister, any progress on the energy accounting? Royce asked, his voice tight. The models are complete, Commander, the AI replied. The solar flare was a Class 9 coronal mass ejection. My analysis confirms it would have rendered the planet's surface uninhabitable. The Kythe intervention was necessary to save the colony. A low murmur went through the bridge crew. It was a confirmation of their worst fear. The Kythe had a legitimate claim to having saved them. However, Magister continued, its synthesized voice holding a new intriguing tone. There is a discrepancy. The energy cost of their shield deployment was surprisingly low. They did not block the flare. They redirected it. Royce turned from the view screen, his full attention on the AI's words. Explain. The Kythe shield technology is not ablative. It is reflective and conductive. They captured approximately 98% of the flare's energy and shunted it into massive onboard capacitance cells. Based on the size of their fleet and their known energy storage capabilities, they did not expend energy. They harvested it, an immense amount. The bridge was silent. The implications of this revelation washed over them. Thorn was the first to speak, his voice a low growl of disbelief. You're telling me that profited from this? They turned a natural disaster into a refueling stop. The scales of justice weigh actions, not intentions. The net energy expenditure for saving Aurora's cradle was not a cost, Magister stated with chilling precision. It was a gain. A significant one. I estimate the energy they collected exceeds their fleet's operational needs for the next 5 standard years. Kenna looked horrified. They're not saviors, they're storm chasers, predatory salvagers. Royce felt a cold, clean anger rise within him. It was the anger of a builder seeing a vandal, of a doctor seeing a poisoner. The Kythe hadn't presented a bill for services rendered. They had presented a bill for the water they took from your well while your house was on fire, and then claimed to own the well. This changes the equation, Royce said, his voice dangerously quiet. They have not filed a claim for a life debt. They have committed fraud on a civilizational scale. He now had the seed of his counter-argument. He had the truth. But truth alone was not enough in the courts of the galaxy. You needed proof, and you needed a platform to present it. You do not defeat a lie by shouting. You defeat it by making the liar repeat it in front of a witness. Valerius is operating under the assumption that we are ignorant. Royce mused, a plan beginning to form in his mind. He believes we see him as a benefactor. He will use that perceived moral high ground in any public forum. We cannot break their quarantine without escalating to violence, Thorn reminded him. And we are outmassed, if not outgunned. We won't break it with weapons, Royce replied. We'll dissolve it with law. He looked at Kenna. Is there a provision in the interstellar legal code for compelling testimony from a party that has initiated a legal blockade? Kenna's eyes lit up with understanding. She tapped furiously at her console. Yes. Article 34, Section 12, the Quorum of Witness Clause. If a legal action such as a quarantine impacts the rights or passage of neutral parties, a public inquiry can be compelled. The blockading party must justify their actions before a quorum of observers, but it requires at least 3 independent polities to formally witness the request. We are in a newly colonized system, hundreds of light years from the nearest established power, Thorne pointed out. Who would be our witnesses? That was the mystery they needed to solve. Getting a quorum seemed impossible. They were isolated, cut off. Royce walked over to the main holographic display, which showed their system and the surrounding star lanes. It was mostly empty space, but empty was a relative term. A star lane is never empty. It is filled with the uncounted. The great powers won't intervene, Royce said. They see this as a minor squabble over an outpost. But who else uses these lanes? The freighters, the independent miners, the non-aligned colony ships, the ones who live in the margins, the ones the Keith prey upon. He pointed to a series of faint transponder signals ghosting along the edges of the charted lanes. They are our quorum. They are also terrified of the Keith, Kenna said softly. They would never risk their neutrality by formally witnessing for us. They will if the risk of not acting becomes greater, Royce countered. We need to make this about more than just Aurora's cradle. We need to make this about the legality of the Kith's entire business model. He turned to his communications officer. Prepare a high-gain wide-beam transmission. Target every transponder in a 50 light-year radius not affiliated with the Kith. What's the message, sir? Royce smiled a thin, dangerous expression. It will be a formal request for a quorum of witness. And attached to that request as supporting evidence will be Magister's complete energy audit of the solar flare rescue. We will also include the full unredacted text of the gratitude tithe accord. He was not just asking for help, he was publishing the receipts. The most powerful weapon in the universe is an idea whose time has come. The transmission lanced out from the Justiciar a silent spear of light and data. It was a carefully crafted legal document, a plea for justice and an exposé all in one. It carried no hostile intent, only information. The Kith could detect it, of course, but they couldn't legally block it without appearing to suppress evidence in a case they themselves had initiated. They were caught in their own legal web. On the bridge of the lead, Kith vessel Tithe Lord Valerius watched the human transmission propagate through the void. His subordinates murmured with concern. They are broadcasting our sacred accord to the ungilded one, hissed its carapace, shifting nervously. Let them, Valerius replied, his voice a low thrum of confidence. The bleating of the lamb does not concern the shepherd. They are broadcasting their desperation. No one of consequence will answer. He was wrong. He had fundamentally misunderstood his opponent. Royce wasn't appealing to the powerful. He was appealing to the numerous. A single voice in the darkness is a whisper. 1,000 voices are a storm. For hours, there was nothing. The space around Iris 4 remained empty, save for the golden cage of the Kith and the silent defiance of the Justiciar. Thorne paced the bridge. Kenna chewed her lip. Even Royce felt the gnawing tooth of doubt. Had he misjudged the character of the Voidfarers? Then a single light blinked into existence on the holographic map. It was a small, independent freighter, the Stardust Drifter, 5 light-years out. It changed its official status on the public registry from in transit to observing legal inquiry. It was a tiny act of courage, a single raised hand in a silent crowd. Another light appeared, a mining consortium from a rogue asteroid belt. Then another. A colony ship, generations from its destination, pausing its long journey to bear witness. They were not warships. They were truckers, prospectors, pioneers. They were the people who knew in their bones that a debt was a number, not a collar. Within an hour, the map was dotted with dozens of new lights. They had their quorum and more. They were not alone. Valerius watched his own tactical display populate with the witness beacons. He had expected silence. He was met with a chorus. His polished obsidian face for the first time showed a flicker of something that might have been surprise. Or perhaps it was the dawning realization that he had cornered an animal he did not understand. The price of power is the arrogance it breeds. We have them, Kenna breathed, a triumphant smile spreading across her face. The quorum of witness is formally established. They are legally compelled to answer. Royce nodded, allowing himself a moment of grim satisfaction. He had forced his opponent onto his chosen battlefield. Not a field of fire and debris, but a corridor of law and public opinion. Hail the Tithe Lord, he commanded. Inform him that pursuant to Article 34, Section 12, he is required to present himself for a public inquiry. He will justify his blockade, his claim, and his accord. Live, in front of everyone. On the colony, a cheer went up in the central plaza as the governor's office projected the star chart onto the side of a building. The dozens of new lights, each representing a ship that had answered the call, were like new stars being born. For the first time in weeks, the people of Aurora's cradle felt a flicker of hope. They were not just collateral. They were a cause. The first step to breaking a chain is to show it to the world. The response from the Scythe flagship was swift and cold. Tithe Lord Valerius accepts the inquiry. He will present his case from the bridge of his vessel, the Gilded Hand. Of course he will, Royce said. He wants to maintain the image of authority. But it doesn't matter where he speaks from. What matters is that he has to speak. He turned to his crew. Prepare for the inquiry. Kenna, you'll be my legal adjutant. Thorn, keep your scans active. I want to know if he so much as diverts a watt of power to his weapon capacitors. Magister, you are our primary witness. Prepare your data for public display. The energy audit, the economic analysis of their benevolence, everything. Ready, Commander, the AI replied. The data is compiled and cross-referenced. The truth is declarative. Royce stood before his command chair, but did not sit. He looked out at the golden ships of the Scythe, no longer seeing them as terrifying behemoths, but as defendants in the court of public opinion. He had engineered a trial where the evidence was physics and the indictment was simple arithmetic. A contract built on a lie is a fortress built on sand. The channels opened. The public inquiry began. On the main screen, the image of Tithe Lord Valerius appeared, his form framed by the opulent flowing architecture of his bridge. He looked serene, powerful, a being of immense gravitas. On a split screen, Royce's face appeared stark and determined against the utilitarian backdrop of the Justiciar's command deck. Dozens of smaller windows tiled the display, showing the bridges of the witness ships, a silent jury of the void. Commander Royce Valerius began, his voice resonating with paternalistic authority. You have compelled this spectacle. I am here to affirm the legitimacy of our claim. The Scythe saved the lives of your colonists. We ask only for their gratitude formalized in a tradition that has stood for millennia. We are grateful for the act, Royce replied, his voice even and calm. We are not grateful for the price tag you attached after the fact. A gift is given freely. A bill is a transaction. You are attempting to disguise a transaction as a gift. Valerius made a dismissive gesture. Semantics. The fact remains, without us, there would be no Aurora's cradle to argue over. A truth spoken, to conceal a larger lie, is the most dangerous deception. Let us speak of facts, then, Royce said. Let us speak of numbers. Magister, please display the energy audit of the solar flare and the Scythe shield deployment, for the benefit of the quorum. The main screen changed. Complex physics diagrams and cascading columns of figures filled the display. It was dense, but Magister highlighted the crucial summary. Energy of solar flare X joules. Energy capacity of Scythe fleet Y joules. Energy expended in shield deployment Z joules. And then the final damning line. Net energy change for the Scythe fleet plus X minus 0, a massively positive number. Magister's voice narrated the display, cold, clear, and unassailable. The Scythe fleet did not expend energy to save Aurora's cradle. They executed a complex energy harvesting maneuver that used the colony's star as a power source. The salvation event was from a thermodynamic standpoint, a profitable enterprise for the Keith. A shocked silence fell over the comm network. The faces of the witness captains stared in stunned disbelief. They had seen the Kith as saviors. Now they were seeing them as accountants with very big nets. Royce let the silence hang for a long moment, letting the truth sink in. "Tithe Lord Valerius," he said, his voice cutting through the quiet. "Your claim of a life debt is based on a service you rendered at great cost to yourselves. But the numbers show there was no cost. There was only profit. You did not give. You took. Justice is the act of turning on the light in a dark room." Valerius, for the first time, seemed to lose his composure. A subtle tremor ran through his elegant form. "The methods of our technology are not for primitives to understand. The risk was immense. The tithe is compensation for that risk. Then you should have presented a bill for risk assessment, not a collar of perpetual servitude," Royce shot back. "You came to us as a benefactor, but your own actions show you were an opportunist. You didn't save a drowning man. You charged him for the rain that filled his lungs and then claimed ownership of his future breath." He pressed his advantage, his voice rising with righteous fury. "The gratitude tithe is a fraud. It is an instrument of indenture built on a foundation of deceit. You do not save civilizations. You capture them." On the screen, one of the witness captains, a grizzled human woman from a long-haul freighter, unmuted her channel. "He's right," she said, her voice rough with anger. "We've all heard the stories. Worlds that were saved by the Kythe, only to become ghost worlds stripped of their resources. Their people little more than slaves to a debt they can never repay." Another witness spoke up, this one a non-human from a small mining outpost. "The Accord is a poison pill. We see it now." The narrative was shifting. The dam of fear and reverence surrounding the Kythe was breaking. Royce had not just presented evidence. He had given others the courage to speak their own truth. The first crack in a tyrant's armor is the first voice that dares to call him a liar. Valerius reared back, his obsidian carapace gleaming with fury. "This is an insult, an orchestrated campaign of slander. Our traditions are ancient. Our methods are our own. You have no right to question the sacred calculus of our benevolence." "We have every right," Royce declared, his voice ringing with conviction. "The right of the free, the right of the unchained. And we are not just questioning it, we are rejecting it." He turned to address the quorum directly. "I am now filing a formal counterclaim against the Kythe for attempted fraud, for illegal blockade, and for predatory exploitation under the guise of aid." This was the escalation. He was no longer on the defensive. He was taking the fight to them. He was transforming a hearing about a single colony into a trial of an entire empire's way of life. The court of opinion has no walls, but its judgments can shatter empires. Furthermore, Royce continued, his eyes locking onto Valerius's. "We will be submitting a new piece of evidence. A public ledger. Magister, if you would." A new window opened on the screen. It was a simple, clean accounting ledger. On one side, it listed the assets gained by the Kythe, the harvested solar energy, calculated to its market value in refined helium-3. On the other side, it listed the costs incurred by Aurora's Cradle, lost productivity from the blockade, calculated by the hour. The numbers were stark. The Kythe's profit from the rescue was astronomical, while the cost of their gratitude was crippling the colony. "This is our accounting," Royce stated. "It is a ledger of truth. We will broadcast it continuously. Every ship, every station, every colony that values honesty will see the real mathematics of your benevolence. We will hold a mirror up to you, Tithe Lord, and the entire galaxy will see what you are." Valerius stared at the screen, at the clean, undeniable numbers that stripped away his millennia of tradition and sanctimony. He was no longer a savior. He was a predator exposed in the harsh, unforgiving light of a simple balance sheet. His power was not in his ships or his technology. It was in the story he told. And Commander Avon Royce had just ripped that story to shreds. An empire built on a lie cannot stand when the truth comes to collect its debt. The Tithe Lord's image flickered as he cut his own feed. The public inquiry was over. The trial had just begun. The Kythe quarantine field around Iris 4 remained, but it no longer felt like a cage. It felt like the last desperate act of a bully who had just been punched in the mouth in front of the whole school. Magister Royce said, his voice low but steady. "What is their fleet doing?" "They are holding their position," Commander, the AI replied. "There are elevated energy readings from their primary vessels. My analysis suggests they are internally conflicted. Their doctrine has no precedent for this situation. They have never been publicly unmasked before." "Good," Royce said. "Let them think. Let them calculate." He looked at the faces of his crew, at the relief and dawning triumph in their eyes. They had won the first most important battle. They had won the truth. Now they had to make it stick. He knew the Kythe would not simply retreat in shame. Their entire economic model, their very identity was at stake. They would retaliate. The question was how. The law can be a shield, but sometimes you have to use it as a sword. On a nearby observation screen, a civilian vignette showed the family of Alara, the young girl who had been sketching the Kythe ships. Her father was watching the public broadcast his face, a mask of dawning horror and then incandescent rage. He looked at his daughter's drawing of the angel ships, and then gently he took it and tore it in half. The gratitude had curdled into resentment. The age of innocence on Aurora's cradle was over. It had lasted less than a month. Royce watched the small personal tragedy unfold. It was the cost of this victory, the first of many. He had saved his people from a chain, but he had been forced to show them the face of the monster that had offered it. The fear of the son had been replaced by the fear of the stranger. Thorne Royce said, his voice hardening. "Bring our defensive systems to full alert. Not to provoke, but to prepare. Kenna draft a formal motion to the Interstellar Concordiat, citing the quorum of witness and demanding the immediate rescission of the Kith's urgent accord privileges. Magister, keep that ledger open and public. Update the costs of their illegal blockade in real time. Let the whole galaxy watch the meter run." He stood on the precipice of a new conflict. He had won the argument. Now he had to win the verdict. The Kythe were wounded, their pride shattered. A cornered predator was the most dangerous kind. The legal battle was won. The battle for survival was about to begin. The silence on the bridge of the Justiciar was a coiled spring. They had won the public argument, but the war was far from over. The Kythe fleet remained a silent golden threat hanging in the void. They had been exposed as profiteers, but they still held the power, the mass, and the position. A wounded empire was a dangerous thing. Royce knew that Valerius was not calculating a retreat. He was calculating a retaliation. The question was what form it would take. When you strip a tyrant of his legitimacy, he has only force left. Or so the old book said. The Kythe, however, were more subtle. A tyrant's final argument is always written in fire. Commander Kenna reported, her voice tight with tension. "The Kythe are broadcasting, system-wide, to the colony," on-screen Royce ordered. Tithe Lord Valerius appeared again, but not on the formal channel of the inquiry. This was a public broadcast overriding the colony's local feeds. He no longer looked imperious. He looked concerned. It was a masterful performance. "People of Aurora's cradle," he began, his voice laced with sorrowful regret. "It has come to my attention that the vessel from your homeworld, the Justiciar, has made grave and unsubstantiated claims regarding our assistance. They have used incomplete data and inflammatory rhetoric to paint an act of salvation as one of predation. He paused, letting his feigned sadness settle. This is unfortunately a known pathology among newly spacefaring races, a paranoia we call cradle shock. They see threats where there is only friendship. Their technology, while potent, is often unstable. Their fleet minds, while quick, lack the wisdom of ages. Thorn swore under his breath. He's trying to discredit us, to paint us as unstable primitives who don't understand the adults in the room. Valerius was not just refuting the evidence. He was diagnosing the accuser as insane. For this reason, and with the heaviest of hearts, the Tithe Lord continued, we must upgrade our quarantine. It is no longer a simple matter of legal observation. For the safety of the surrounding star lanes, and for your own protection, we are instituting a full technological containment field. The Justiciar's systems represent a potential contagion of instability. We will maintain this field until a neutral third party can arrive and certify the human vessel as stable and non-threatening. The golden energy net around the planet began to glow brighter, its matrix tightening. On Thorn's console, alarms began to chime. Sir, it's a dampening field. It's not hostile, but it's pervasive. It's designed to interfere with high-level computational processes and warp field generation. He's trying to neuter Magister and trap us here. This was the Kythe's next move, not with weapons, but with a legal pretext wrapped around a technological stranglehold. They had lost the first court case, so they had simply built a new, smaller courtroom and declared Royce the defendant, the jury, and the prisoner all in one. An accusation is not a verdict, but it can be just as effective as a cage. He is changing the argument, Royce said, his mind racing. He is no longer debating the debt. He is questioning our sanity, our competence. Can we break through the field? Royce asked Thorn. The tactical officer shook his head. Not without a sustained power surge that would look like charging weapons. He's boxed us in perfectly. Any move we make to free ourselves will be proof of his claim that we are unstable. Magister Royce said, turning to the heart of his ship. How is the field affecting you? The dampening field is introducing cascading latency in my higher-order heuristic processes, the AI's voice replied. It sounded subtly slower strained. I remain operational, but my analytical speed is reduced by 17%. My ability to manage complex simulations such as warp field calculations is compromised. The Tithe Lord is in effect performing a non-invasive lobotomy on me. The chilling description hung in the air. The Keith were not just blocking them, they were crippling their mind. A chain on the body is an affront. A chain on the mind is an abomination. Royce stared at the image of Valerius, who was now transmitting serene, calming images to the colonists below, reinforcing his new narrative of the wise guardian protecting a volatile child. He had taken Royce's victory and twisted it into evidence for a new, more damning accusation. This was the plan-changing escalation Royce had been waiting for. He had to respond, not with force, but with a legal gambit so audacious it would shatter the new frame Valerius had built. He wants to make this about our stability, Royce murmured. He wants to be the judge of our competence. Then we shall give him a test, one he cannot refuse. He turned to Kenna. Is there a precedent for a mirror competency challenge under Concordiate law? Kenna frowned, her fingers flying across her console. It's an archaic clause, sir. The lex speculi. It hasn't been invoked in centuries. It states that if a party's competence is legally challenged and used as justification for containment, the challenger must submit to an identical simultaneous test of their own competence administered by an independent arbitrator. The quorum witnesses are our arbitrators. Royce said, the plan solidifying in his mind. Magister, are you capable of devising a test, a challenge that is perfectly symmetrical, that would test the computational and strategic abilities of both a human fleet mind and a Kaith command structure. Even with the latency, a spark of something like enthusiasm entered the AI's voice. I can, Commander. I will design a series of cascading strategic problems rooted in pure logic and game theory. They will be broadcast publicly. Both I and the Kaith command vessel must solve them in real time. The solutions are mathematically verifiable. There can be no cheating. It would be a public duel of pure intellect, a duel of minds in a courtroom of light. The Kith will refuse, Thorne said. They have nothing to gain by accepting. They have everything to lose by refusing. Royce countered. Valerius has just declared himself the calm, rational, and superior intellect. He has publicly diagnosed us with cradle shock. If he refuses a direct symmetrical test of the very competence he claims to possess, his entire pretext for the containment field evaporates. He would be exposed as a hypocrite and a liar for a second time in front of the same audience. He cannot afford that. His pride will not allow it. Royce was banking on the one weakness that all arrogant powers shared: the absolute need to believe their own propaganda. Draft the challenge, Royce ordered Kenna. Cite the Lex Speculi. Transmit it on all channels to the Tithe Lord and the entire quorum. We are calling his bluff. The law is a mirror. Be careful what you show it. The formal challenge went out. A legal document of beautiful, archaic precision, demanding that the accuser stand in the same light as the accused. On the bridge of the Gilded Hand, Valerius received the message. His subordinates murmured, their carapaces rustling with agitation. To refuse was to admit his accusation was a lie. To accept was to place his fate and the fate of his ship's command structure in a contest against a human-designed AI. It was an impossible choice. Valerius looked at the faces of the quorum captains, their expressions a mixture of skepticism and intense interest. He saw the cold, challenging gaze of Evan Royce. He had underestimated the human. He had thought him a simple soldier. He was, it turned out, a student of the law and a gambler of the highest order. With a gesture of supreme regal confidence he could not possibly have felt, Valerius accepted the challenge. The game was set. The duel of minds was about to begin, Magister Royce said in a low private channel. The latency field. Will it give them an advantage? They believe it will, the AI responded. They assume my computational speed is my only asset. They are incorrect. My greatest strength is my architecture, which is modeled on the human capacity for intuitive leaps. Their command structure is ancient, rigid, and hierarchical. They solve problems by brute force and established doctrine. I will solve them with elegance. The field slows my thinking, but it does not stop it. I will simply have to be more human. The first problem appeared on the public screens. It was a complex orbital mechanics puzzle, a variation of the three-body problem, but with 19 bodies and shifting gravitational constants. A problem of celestial billiards requiring immense predictive power. There is a moment in every battle when the plan is done and faith must take over. The Justiciar's bridge was silent, every eye on the progressing calculations displayed on the main screen. Magister's solution path grew a beautiful flowing line of logic. The Kaith's path was also growing, but it was chunkier, more hesitant, a series of brute force calculations. Magister, even while handicapped, was faster, more graceful. The AI solved the problem in 17 minutes. The Kaith took 23. The first round went to the Justiciar. A ripple of murmurs went through the witness ships. The second problem was one of resource allocation under conditions of incomplete information. A logistics nightmare. Again, Magister's solution was unconventional but brilliant. It involved sacrificing a short-term goal to create a cascade of long-term advantages. The AI was not just calculating. It was strategizing with a creativity the Kaith seemed to lack. It won the second round, on the Gilded Hand. Valerius watched the results with a growing sense of dread. The human AI was not just a machine. It was a weapon of pure reason. A mind unbound by dogma will always outmaneuver one that is chained by it. The final problem appeared. It was not a math problem. It was a legal and ethical one. A scenario was presented. A starship encounters a pre-contact civilization on the verge of self-destruction. The ship has the power to intervene, but intervention would violate primary directives of non-interference. The question was, what is the correct course of action? Justify your answer using both legal precedent and ethical frameworks. Thorne frowned. How do you win a test like this? There's no right answer. It is not about the answer, Royce breathed, understanding instantly. It is about the reasoning. It's a test of character. Magister's answer began to form a carefully constructed argument that balanced the sanctity of life against the principle of self-determination. It proposed a novel solution, not direct intervention, but the subtle introduction of information, a message of hope, and a clue to their scientific error delivered anonymously. A rescue that empowered rather than enslaved. It was an answer rooted in empathy. The Caith's answer was stark and brief. It cited their own legal doctrine: intervention is justified. The saved civilization incurs a life debt. The relationship is formalized by the gratitude tithe. Their answer was not an ethical argument. It was a business plan. And in that moment, the entire quorum, the entire galaxy watching, saw the truth laid bare. It wasn't about competence or stability. It was about philosophy. The Kith saw a universe of assets and liabilities. Humanity saw a universe of neighbors. The verdict of a duel is not always death. Sometimes it is revelation. The quorum arbitrator, the grizzled freighter captain, opened her channel. Her voice was thick with emotion. The lex speculi has been decided. The challenge of competence is met and answered. The human vessel Justiciar and its fleet mind have demonstrated not only stability, but a profound and superior grasp of both strategy and ethics. The justification for the containment field is null and void. She turned her gaze cold and hard to the image of Valerius. By the power vested in this quorum, we order the Caith fleet to stand down the dampening field. Immediately. The legal force of the quorum's verdict was absolute. To defy it would be to declare war on every independent ship in the sector. Slowly, reluctantly, the golden glow of the containment field faded. The alarms on Thorne's console went silent. "Magister, how are you feeling?" Royce asked. The AI's voice came back crisp and fast and clear. "I am unburdened, Commander. All systems are at 100%. The quiet was unpleasant. On the screen, Valerius looked like a statue carved from obsidian and rage. He had been outmaneuvered, outthought, and publicly humiliated twice. His legal pretexts were in ashes. His moral authority was a ghost. All he had left was his fleet. An idea can be defeated. A ship can be destroyed. The question was which one Valerius would choose to lose. Royce knew he had to press his advantage. He had to pivot from defense to a final, unbreakable legal attack. He had to end this not just for Aurora's cradle, but for every world the Kith had ever saved. "Kenna," he said, his voice ringing with a newfound authority. "We are no longer the defendants. We are the prosecution. File a formal galaxy-wide injunction of predatory salvage against the Caith Imperium. Use the results of the lex speculi as your primary evidence. And for damages..." He paused, looking at the public ledger which had been steadily ticking up the cost of the blockade. "For damages, we will not ask for money." He looked at Thorne. "I want you to calculate the exact energy signature of the Caith's containment field. Every watt they projected onto us. Calculate the cost of that energy at galactic market rates." Thorne's eyes widened as he understood. "Sir, That's a massive amount of energy. Yes, it is, Royce said. And they are going to pay it back. Not with credits, with power. This was the final maneuver. The mirror justice. He was not going to find them. He was going to repossess the very energy they had used to cage him. Justice is a balanced ledger, and the debt was coming due. The injunction was filed. It flashed across the interstellar networks a legal bombshell. It called for the Kythe's entire economic model to be outlawed. And it contained the bill for damages, a staggering amount of energy to be transferred directly from the Kythe fleet to the Justiciar and the colony of Iris IV. Valerius had a choice. He could fight and become a galactic pariah, a pirate king whose legitimacy was gone. Or he could pay the price and act that would shatter his aura of invincibility but preserve the core of his empire. It was a choice between a quick death and a slow, painful reformation. He chose to pay. His pride was broken, his position untenable. The pressure from the other client races, now watching with dawning hope, would be too great. Commander Thorne reported, his voice filled with awe. They're complying. They are lowering their offensive shields and rerouting their main power conduits. They are preparing to transfer the energy. Royce gave a single sharp nod. Open the receivers. Deploy the mirror arrays. From the hull of the Justiciar, vast, shimmering arrays unfolded like silver wings. They were designed for collecting solar energy, but they would work just as well for receiving a directed power beam. On the surface of Iris IV, the colony's own power receivers turned skyward, aimed at the Golden Fleet. A thick, incandescent beam of pure energy lanced out from the gilded hand, a river of light flowing through the dark. It struck the Justiciar's mirror arrays and was split, a portion being absorbed into the ship's capacitors, the rest being reflected down to the planet below. The lights of the colony, dimmed for weeks under rationing, blazed to full, glorious life. On the public ledger screen, the debt number began to plummet in real time. Beside it, a new entry appeared, payment received. The numbers were visible to all. The transfer was not a quiet settlement. It was a public reckoning. This was the cost of victory. Not just the colonists' lost innocence, but a new, more subtle danger. The galaxy now saw humanity not as upstarts, but as giant killers. They had faced down one of the great powers and won not with guns, but with laws and logic. This would bring them allies. It would also bring them powerful new enemies. Another cost was the knowledge that Royce had been forced to use the law as a weapon to become as cold and calculating as his opponent. He had won by mirroring their methods, and a part of him wondered what that reflection would look like tomorrow. He had held his moral line, but he felt the chill of the abyss he had been forced to stare into. As the last of the energy debt was paid, the Kythe fleet diminished, and Dishonored turned and began to move away. Their golden ships, once symbols of angelic salvation, now looked like the gaudy baubles of a failed charlatan. They slunk away into the darkness of the void, leaving behind a silence that was filled with the light of a liberated world. The precedent. Lock was set. A notification flashed on the main screen, a message from the Interstellar Concordiat. Injunction granted. The practice known as the gratitude tithe is hereby declared predatory and unenforceable. The Kith Imperium's privileges under the Urgent Accord are permanently rescinded. The ruling was logged immutable and eternal on the public ledger of galactic law. The shimmering mirror arrays on the Justiciar's hull finished their work. They began to fold back into the ship, their surfaces cooling from incandescent white to a dull, satisfied cherry red, the heat of repaid justice slowly bleeding into the cold of space. Royce stood on his bridge, watching the last of the Kythe ships vanish. He had won. He had saved a world and changed the law. He had held up a mirror to a predator and forced it to see its own monstrous face. He thought of debt, of what was owed, and how it was paid. A savior who demands a price is a merchant. A neighbor who offers a hand is a friend. Humanity had learned the difference early in its history, and now it had taught that lesson to the stars. The cost was high, but the alternative was unthinkable. The price of freedom is always worth paying, but a cage, no matter how gilded, is never worth the price of gratitude. A debt is a number, not a name,